You people, that sounds hostile. Don't say it like that. You people with your comments on the Star Trek videos that I do. Some of them are so great and really insightful, and you ask really good questions. Some of them are not so great. But I thought it would be fun to respond to some of your comments that you've left on past Trek Actually and Not Actually Trek Actually videos on camera in this video. And that's what I'm going to do. Of course, this isn't quite a proper Trek Actually video because I didn't really script it. So we're going to call this one another Not Actually Trek Actually, because I'm putting in a minimum of effort and hoping to maximize the return. Because if you don't put a lot in and then you get a lot out of it, then it's, you know what, it's economics. You probably wouldn't understand it. Don't insult them. One quick note before I get to the first comment. I will be showing you the comments that I'm responding to on screen, but I have blurred out the names and the user pics of the commenters because even though they left comments on a public video, they didn't consent to have their comments featured on camera in a video and then have the poster respond to them on camera. It's just, I feel like it's kind of bad form to do that to somebody without getting their permission, and I didn't bother to get any of these people's permissions, so I'm just leaving out their names and their user pics, just in case my response to their comment gets a little snarky or a little derisive. I don't want to inadvertently encourage any of you watching to go find their comment and give them a hard time. Please don't do that. Please don't ever give someone a hard time or harass somebody because of something I've said in a video, ever. And just in case you feel like maybe you want to do that, I've made it a little tiny bit harder to do that in response to this video. No names, no user pics. Anyway, what's the first comment that I'm going to respond to in hopefully a very respectful and mature way? This is one from the first Trek Actually video, my Captain Jellicoe video. It says, they did kill a main character though. Remember Tasha? Yes, of course, I remember Tasha Yar being killed off in season 1 of TNG, but I think the point I was making in that video that comment is a response to is that when Star Trek The Next Generation was in production, TV showrunners had not yet acquired the habit of killing off major characters just to screw with the audience or to shock the audience. They killed off Tasha because Denise Crosby was leaving the show. What I was talking about was killing major characters in a show when there is no behind-the-scenes necessity to do it. They choose to do it as part of the story because they want to shock the audience or do something like that. It's two different things. It's not just killing off a major character. It's killing off a major character by choice in order to evoke a particular reaction from the audience. This next one is from the Is the Transporter Actually a Murder Machine video, and it says, here's another point to consider. Remember the episode with Moriarty from Data's Sherlock Holmes program? He became self-aware and in his second appearance wants to be brought into the real world. They pass it off to him saying they found a way using the transporters. Now, if the transporter just takes a person and digitizes them for transport, essentially creating a new you at the destination, then it should have worked to beam items or holographic people off the hologrid, since they are essentially digital information themselves. Just a thought. See, that sounds good with just a thought, but if you spend a few more thoughts on it, I think you'll realize that it's not actually a very plausible idea given the way that we've been told the holodeck works and the way the transporter works. Think about what you're asking the transporter to do if you beam a holographic person off of the holodeck and try to materialize them outside the holodeck as a real person. You're not just asking the transporter to recreate the image of the person using real matter. You're asking them to recreate that person's brain, their internal organs, their skeletal structure, every cell in their body. You're basically asking the transporter to manufacture, to replicate a human being out of the pattern that is found on the holodeck. Holodeck projections are just the surface. And yeah, the more complex holodeck programs that we've seen, like the Doctor and Voyager, for example, they have brain patterns, they have memories, they have thoughts, and maybe even arguably feelings, but all of those things are stored in the computer. None of that is in the body. The physical body that you see is just a projection. So if that's what they're using the pattern enhancers to beam off the holodeck and onto the transporter pad, there's no substance there. This next one is from the video, Is Janeway Actually a Good Captain? And it says, quote, I'm not here to dick around asking irrelevant nerd questions. I'm here to determine if Janeway is actually a great captain, unquote. Contradiction within the same breath. That's true. That is a contradiction. And as far as I can tell, there are two possibilities to explain the presence of that contradiction in the video. Either one, it's just an honest contradiction that I was not aware of and remained completely unaware of as I wrote the script for that video, performed that video in front of the camera, edited that video, watched that video several times to make sure everything was right, and then uploaded that video and published it publicly on YouTube. Or possibility number two, I was aware of the contradiction and it's an intentional contradiction that I put in there and then delivered in front of the camera with kind of a clueless deadpan because it's a joke. It's a joke. This next one is from the video SJW's Invented Star Trek. Kirk, Spock, McCoy does not equal three old white dudes. One of them is half friggin' alien, and that is the point. He's a friggin' alien, and nobody bats an eye, except sometimes McCoy, and that's not from racism or xenophobia, it's from personality clashes. And they're still friends, even though they fight all the time. It's bloody brilliant. Kirk's pals also represent the twin natures of the human mind, emotion and logic, the balance of which we all must find. Also bloody brilliant. I'm with you as far as that last bit. McCoy and Spock representing different aspects of human nature, and Kirk sort of can be viewed as the synthesis of the two. He's a combination of McCoy's passion and Spock's logic. I think that's right on the money. That's a great way to interpret those characters and to analyze those characters. But it's three white dudes. I mean, the fact that one of the white dudes plays an alien doesn't mean that it's not three white dudes. The point I was making was that even though Star Trek, the classic series, is very justly celebrated for how diverse and inclusive its cast was, we have to also keep in mind that the three leading roles were taken by white dudes. That's the point I was making. The fact that one of the white dudes is playing an alien doesn't mean that the cast was not led and the show was not centered on three white dudes. If he had been playing not a Vulcan but a black person and it was Leonard Nimoy in blackface, you don't count that as a black person on the show. And by the way, a lot of that stuff McCoy says to Spock in regards to his Vulcan heritage, his pointy ears, his green blood, etc., is totally racist. And I say that as someone who thinks McCoy is one of the best, if not the best characters on the show. I love Dr. McCoy. He's one of my favorite characters in all of Star Trek. But when he calls Spock a pointy-eared, green-blooded, inhuman Vulcan, that's racist. It's not cool. Imagine if Spock was black and McCoy was saying racist stuff about black people towards Spock. He was making fun of his physical features. He was calling him the N-word or some other epithet about that is targeted at black people. You wouldn't be able to say, oh, but it's cool because they're friends, or it's cool because McCoy really likes him. If Spock isn't okay with it, which he doesn't seem to be, he seems at best sort of reluctantly tolerant of it, then it's not okay. It's racist. And it's okay to say it's racist. It's okay to be critical of things you love. It's okay for me to be a huge Star Trek fan, to say I love Star Trek, I love classic Star Trek, I love Dr. McCoy, but some of the stuff that the writers have Dr. McCoy saying to Spock is racist. And I don't have to make excuses for that or come up with a reason why that's actually okay if I'm a fan of the show. I can just accept it and acknowledge it and be critical of it. This next one is from the video, Is Dukat actually a hero? Why does it take you 20 minutes to say no, absolutely not? Well, in Hamlet, Polonius tells us that brevity is the soul of wit, but I'm not that witty, so I need more time. And by the way, is that really what you want? Do you really want YouTube videos that are just people stating their thesis as concisely as possible? I mean, dig this. This is the log line for the movie The Godfather, okay? The aging patriarch of an organized crime dynasty transfers control of his clandestine empire to his reluctant son. There. I just saved you 3 hours. And wasn't that just as good as the movie? Next up is one from the video Why Tom Paris is actually Starfleet's #1 badass. It says, why do you not like Canon in general? I'm trying to make myself not like Canon for anything anymore because it doesn't matter to writers and media anymore, in my opinion, as long as money only matters. I don't know, I think you're being a little pessimistic there. I do think canon matters to writers. I think canon matters very much to writers who are working on projects that lean very heavily on their fictional worlds I think the writers of Star Trek, the writers of Star Trek Discovery, or the writers of the Kelvinverse films, even though a lot of canon hawks might disagree with their choices or might not like those movies, I don't really see how you can seriously argue that they're not written by people who have a knowledge and affection for the established Star Trek canon. Just because a writer chooses to ignore a part of it or depart from it doesn't mean that the writer isn't aware of it or doesn't care. I think those are two different things, and that's just a choice that a writer makes. If I do this, it contradicts canon, but maybe this is the right choice for this story. And that's where I come down on the issue of canon too. It's not that I don't care about canon. It's not that I don't think canon is important at all. I think you should have a world in which your story happens that is internally consistent. And that's basically what canon means. But I also don't think that canon should be absolutely sacrosanct so that it stands in the way of a good story. I think the story is the most important thing. And I think the story that you are writing, that you are telling right now, is the most important thing. That's just my attitude as a writer and as an audience member. And if you need to depart from something in canon in order to tell me a great story, if the story is good enough, I probably won't care. That's my attitude toward canon in general. This next one is from the video, Did Captain Archer Actually Commit Genocide? It says, do you have a different understanding of the word inflict than I do? Not giving someone something doesn't inflict. Taking something inflicts. Imposing something inflicts. Not acting doesn't inflict. Well, it depends on what you're talking about being inflicted. And this is a point that I probably should have made a little clearer in that video. When I say that what Archer and Phlox do to the Valakians could reasonably be considered genocide because they inflict conditions that will lead to the death of an entire category of people. I'm not talking about the condition of them being sick. They don't inflict the disease. You're quite right. If that's what you're saying, if the conditions you're referring to are the disease that's going to kill them, presumably, then yes, you're right. Archer does not inflict those conditions. The infliction of the condition happens when Phlox develops the cure for the disease, and then they choose to withhold it. By having a cure at hand that can help them, that can prevent their extinction, and then willfully choosing not to share it, you are inflicting a condition on those people that will lead to the eradication, presumably, of an entire category of people, of an entire race. That's the infliction. Next, a comment from the video, everything I know about Star Trek I learned from watching Star Trek. Do you have eidetic memory or something? I could watch something literally 50 times and not remember this level of detail. Like, seriously, did you ace tests in school by just flipping through the book? Oh no, if only that's how it worked. Actually, the way my brain seems to work is I do have really excellent recall, but the things I am the best at remembering are the things that are the most trivial, the things that are probably the least important to my actual life. Not like learning a new language or learning a new skill or remembering someone's name or an important thing from someone else's life or anything. It's like details from Star Trek and Batman and Superman and stuff. Now, it did get me a spot on my high school It's Academic team back in the day. I was recruited for our It's Academic team by our guidance counselor, who called me into her office and said, Steve, I want you on this team because I feel like the team needs someone whose brain is just full of junk. And I said, great, I would love to be on the It's Academic team, and I was honored to be chosen. And then I was kicked off the team because I was ineligible due to my grades. This one's from the video, Why the Prime Directive Might Actually Be a Terrible Rule. The Maquis are part of the Federation, dummy. Comments that insult my intelligence while also missing a basic point of the video they are responding to are my favorite genre of YouTube comments. I know the Maquis are part of the Federation. I say that in the video. It's crucial to the argument I make in the video that references the Maquis, that the Maquis be in the Federation, and I know that the Maquis are in the Federation. Because in referencing the Maquis and the conflict that gives birth to the Maquis, the colonists along the Cardassian border, the Federation colonists that are being forced to either leave their homes or live under Cardassian rule, is an example, in my mind, of the inconsistency in the values that supposedly underlie the Prime Directive. The Prime Directive is meant to keep the Federation from meddling in the internal affairs of other societies or other communities, but it's okay to do that if the society is under the Federation umbrella. If you're talking about a colony that is not a Federation colony, oh, sorry, can't interfere in the internal affairs of that society. But if it's Federation colonists, oh, you can do whatever you want to them. You can force them to leave their planet if you want to, if it serves your greater purpose, because they're in the Federation. Prime Directive doesn't apply. I was just pointing out that if one of the values on which the Prime Directive is founded is that people have a right to govern their own society without outside interference, it doesn't really make sense for the Federation to be able to come in and mess things up in a Federation society, but say, no, we can't do that for a non-Federation society. So the Maquis being in the Federation is actually crucial to the point I was making. This next one is from the video Why Barclay is Actually Star Trek's Greatest Hero, and it says, no lasting effects. 2 of the 3 serious examples you gave, being abducted by the Borg and tortured by the Cardassians, showed him in therapy as the last scene before the credits. I believed I could see 5 lights. Picard admitted that he was actually broken by the torture just before the end of the episode. You're absolutely right. At the end of that episode, Picard does admit that the Cardassian torture broke him. And it does appear that it had a profound psychological effect on him. And then how many times is it mentioned after that episode? I believe you'll find that it is mentioned 0 times in subsequent episodes and movies. This next one is from the video Is the post-TOS Enterprise actually the same ship? Kirk mentions that the Enterprise was undergoing a refit. The characters were fully aware that the ship had changed. I know. I make that exact point in the video a couple times. It's a pretty important point. In fact, I believe I say in the video that the fact that the characters are aware of the difference and that the difference is explained in the story is the very thing that creates the Ship of Theseus problem, which is the subject of the video. The ship is totally different, or at least extremely different. People know that it's different, but they treat it as though it's the same ship. Therefore, we might feel compelled to ask the philosophical question, is it really the same ship? Or is it so different that we can't call it the same ship that it was before the changes began? That's the question that is the basis of the video. And if the characters don't recognize the change, then you can't ask the question, because then you would just have to assume it was a retcon. So, yeah. And one more. This last one is from the most recent episode of Trek Actually, Who Actually Ruined the Borg, and it says, isn't it established that the Borg control a significant amount of the territory in the Delta Quadrant? Would it have made sense for them to cross the Delta Quadrant without encountering the Borg frequently? Isn't that like putting them on the far end of the Gamma Quadrant, only to have them only occasionally or seldom encounter the Dominion? And if they encounter them frequently, don't they need to find some way to actually survive those encounters? The Borg Queen thing is definitely a valid criticism, but Voyager didn't come up with that. Well, see, this brings us back to the issue of canon, because you're right. They had established that the Delta Quadrant was Borg territory, so given that, yes, it makes sense that Voyager would encounter the Borg over and over and over again throughout the series. But, on the other hand, and hear me out, it's all make-believe. And really, the writers could have done whatever they wanted. And if they had not wanted to use the Borg as often for any reason, whether it was to preserve the Borg as a cool, intimidating, scary villain and not water them down, or for some other reason, they could have done that too. It's not as though they had to use the Borg because they set their show in what had previously been established as Borg territory. If they hadn't wanted to use the Borg in the show as much or even at all, they could have done that too. They could have made that creative choice and found a way to establish it and justify it in their show. They didn't use the Borg as often as they did in Voyager because they had no choice, or because it wouldn't have made sense if they didn't.
They could have made it make sense because they were the ones making it all up. Voyager could have handled the Borg in a different way. They could have used the Borg a lot more sparingly, and they didn't. They chose to overuse them for some reason, but they didn't have to do it. You can't justify it by saying, well, they were in the Delta Quadrant, they had no choice. There is no Delta Quadrant. Not as depicted in Star Trek. It's make-believe. It was writers making a choice. And if I say I think the writers made a bad choice, it's not a rebuttal of my opinion to say, oh, actually the writers didn't have a choice because of this thing that has been previously established in canon. It's still writers making a choice. Well, that is an even dozen, which is as good of a place as any to stop, so I will call an end to this for now. I am going to do this recurring from now on. I'll try to do a comment responses video as a Not Actually Trek Actually every other month or so as I continue to do new videos and as your comments on all of the videos accumulate. So thank you so much for watching and for commenting. Some of your comments are absolutely brilliant. You ask questions that I didn't think of when I was writing the videos, or you clarify points that I should have probably made more clear in the video, or you correct me on things that I got wrong or that I overlooked or that I forgot, and that is awesome. I so appreciate that. And some of you leave comments that sound like you were watching a totally different video, or you were only half paying attention to the video, or you didn't get a point that I made in the video and took pains to emphasize, and I just am baffled that you missed it somehow. But I just want to apologize to anyone who felt I was too aggressive or too hostile or too snarky or condescending or whatever. Some of that was a little exaggerated for the performance, for comic effect or dramatic effect, and some of it was actually 100% authentic. And I'll leave it to you to figure out which was which. But thank you so much for the comments. Keep leaving them on all the videos. I will come back in another month or so to do another one of these comment response videos. Thank you so much for watching the Trek Actually videos. Don't forget to listen to the Ensign's Log, the Star Trek themed comedy podcast that I co-host with Jason Harding, that is linked in the description of this video if you dig the Star Trek stuff. That's it. I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.